Hi, everyone. This is Jolene Beaton, date and relationship coach with It's Just Lunch and Elite Private Search. I am interviewing Andrea Owen today. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, Jolene. Happy to be here.
Yes, I want to give you a proper introduction. Everyone, Andrea Owen is an author, global speaker, and professional certified life coach. She helps women achieve, maximize unshakable confidence. I love that, and master resilience. She has taught hundreds of thousands of women tools and strategies to be able to empower themselves to live their most kick ass life through speaking, her books, coaching, and her wildly popular podcast with close to 3 million downloads. She is the proud author of How to Stop Feeling Like Shit 14 Habits That Are Holding You Back from Happiness. I loved this book. I thought it was
Thank you.
really wonderful. Um, this is her third book coming out right now, which is entitled Make Some Noise, Speak Your Mind, and Own Your Strength. This is coming in August 2021. And this is a little bit of what prompted, my desire to interview you, because I work with so many men and women that are trying to figure out the dating world in modern dating, and maybe they haven't dated in 20, 30 years, right? So they're like, what is this Me Too? What's going on? How do I, and the women are like, how do I speak up, live out loud? So it couldn't come at a better time. I do want to also let everyone know that we are friends. Andrea and I have known each other for over 20 years. And I've been on the ride watching her success. And it's so funny. I was reminded of a story this morning that I don't know if you remember, but we were in a PF Chang's and I must have been 20 years old. And we're in the bathroom and you said, what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, I don't know, and you said, you know what you should do? And I go, what? You need to be on the radio. You have the best voice. You need to be a DJ.
I vaguely remember that.
And I was like, I need to be a radio DJ. It was amazing. So this right now is as close to it as I have made.
And it's funny, I've always had a knack for seeing people's strengths, and not just their strengths, but like their superpowers, for lack of a better word. And I guess I've always a little bit been like the consummate cheerleader and coach. And, here we are 15 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. And so, and then even when I was looking at, I got a reminder the other day on our Facebook feed, and it was about another interview we had done, and your words just were so impactful then. And so when I had the privilege of reading Make Some Noise earlier, I was again blown away. You have a bestseller. It is going to touch millions of people. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really excited for it to come out. I appreciate that.
I bet. Okay, so I want to dive into some topics. Some are going to touch on the book. Some I just, were popping in my head when I was thinking, okay, what can you bring to really impact our clientele? And one of the things I want to start discussing is women feel like they are too much by wanting clarity on their relationships, their status. And they feel like, when do I ask? How do I ask? And so I would love your thoughts on just any thoughts on it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have so many different directions we could go. And you know what just popped into my mind when you asked that? I don't know if you remember this. It was maybe 20 years ago, the book The Rules came out. Do you remember that? You were probably pretty young.
I was, and I read it, but probably a decade ago.
Okay, so it's very sort of old school dating rules. Here's how many days that you wait to, all of that, which we've probably all heard our grandmothers and our mothers tell us.
Right.
It's a little old school, but I think that those sort of rules are starting to go away, and women especially are starting to feel more empowered, and men are also realizing that uncomfortable conversations need to happen. We can't just play games and try to mind read and try to read between the lines with texts and things like that. So all that to say, being too much is one of women's, and I'm speaking very generally here, one of our worst fears of being perceived that way. It's very closely related to being needy. And, we grow up and by we, I mean people who identify as women, we grow up sort of understanding these kind of, social ways of being. And we understand fairly early on that it's not okay to be needy. It's not okay to be expressive, overly expressive with your emotions, with your feelings, et cetera, et cetera. So, we become adult women and we don't want to be perceived that way. So we overthink everything, we overthink every conversation. And what I would love to see is that it's just not a big deal to just say what's there. That's one of my favorite terms from the coaching school that I went to over a decade ago is that's what they encouraged us to do. Is just say what's there. And of course, you want to do that with kindness and compassion as best you can. But wouldn't life be so much different if we just said what's there? Like if we just said what was on our mind and instead of trying to figure out what's going on?
Absolutely. I always tell someone if they ask me and they say, I just feel like, I want it, and they'll hide behind, I want to have it to happen organically. And I'm like, just remove that. It's this,
Yeah.
just ask, hey, I actually think that there's a connection here. Do you feel the same? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah.
The earlier on, of the less pressure, right?
Exactly. And it's one of the I lost my train of thought here for a second. I got excited about like just saying what's there. I remember that my husband, we were kind of going through this, how you sort of do this dance and figuring out how the other person wants to be supported, especially when you're in a couple and something really difficult happens. Maybe someone loses their job, you lose a parent, like these sort of big things. And for some of us, we want our partner to show up and just be there and listen. Sometimes we need a hug. Sometimes we need just to like let us cry. Rarely do we want our partner to fix it, which I know can be a problem in relationships. But I finally got to the point with my husband now where I told him exactly what it is that I was needing from him, like almost like a script. And like my 25-year-old self would have said, no, I want him to just know. It feels stupid if I'm giving him a script of what to say. But now I'm like, now 20 years later, I'm like, no, I'm in this for the long haul with him. I hate the word training. Like, that's not what I mean, but more or less, like, I am telling him exactly how I want to be loved and supported. And if he has to learn it he wrote it on a Post-it. It was like the sweetest thing ever. And like, now he knows. Now he knows. We've been married for 13 years. Now he knows exactly what to say. Now it's more organic because he's put his own spin on it and things like that. And it's so much easier than wishing that he would just figure it out and then feeling resentful when he doesn't.
Exactly. Well, and so to piggyback off that thought, what'll happen in date 1, 2, and 3, they're like, I don't know this person. I can't tell them what I want. And I'm like, you can, but it doesn't actually, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm like, it doesn't have to be directed at that. I need this from you. It can be this, here's my philosophy on dating. Here's my
Yeah.
philosophy around dating, love, and relationships and marriage. Here's what I am trying to bring into my life. And then the universe will move them out of your way if they can't rise to the occasion, right? If
Right.
that's not what they want, then they'll disconnect, they'll peter out. If they're like, she's speaking my love language, which a
Mhm.
lot of men come and they are like, just tell me what to do. you know,
Right.
I
That's
always
exactly
joke
my
around,
husband.
I know, I always joke around and say, like, I'll have a woman ask me, what's the difference between coaching men and women? And I go, the men do what I tell them to, and the women fight me on it. And
There's got to be a better way.
the men just say, okay, that sounds good. I'll do it. They pick up the phone, they call, they'll do whatever. The women are like, no, I don't think so. So
That's so interesting because I only coach women, but I can see that would happen. And again, it's a generalization, but I think for the most part you're right. And that goes back to some research that I read when I was writing this book about the difference between men and women starts from when we're very young. So traditionally, boys are encouraged to roughhouse. I noticed this too with my husband, just how much like shit shoveling happens back and forth, like the relentless razzing and teasing that happens, that starts on the playground
Right.
where they're encouraged to do that. And it's just sort of like normal boyhood, if you will. And in the long run, that teaches them resilience and that teaches them risk taking. And like my head exploded when I read this research. I was like, "Oh my gosh." And girls aren't taught the same thing. And so and that research was related to something I was reading around men negotiating their salaries and how much more likely they are to negotiate their salaries with their if it's their first job or their fifth job. And that is one of the reasons that there's a pay gap. And it's so fascinating to me. You know, I have a boy and a girl, my children, and it starts so young. And that's what a lot of this book is like the socialization and the conditioning that women receive, that, you know, we find ourselves as adult women that we have to actively unlearn in order to be in relationships with people and a relationship with ourselves.
Oh, I was blown away. Like, I'm so glad you brought up the kids. I had a recent, I hear stories from my 15 and a half year old stepson, and, he, about the ladies, the women, and, and their teasing and their aggression and their belittling. And I was blown away because you don't think that
Mhm.
it works both ways. And I was a little bit shocked to say the least.
I mean, there's a difference between like playful teasing and just like outright shaming. Like my daughter tells me about this too. It's like they're calling it roasting. And I'm like, that is awful. Like,
Well, it's awful. And I think as parents, we have to, I mean, obviously I'm in the dating in relationship world, and I know you're in the coaching world. So I'm sure you do the same thing, but we have to teach these kids how to date properly and with kindness. And I mean, we have to teach them a lot, but
yeah.
obviously I'm really passionate about that. I do want to talk to you a little bit about women and their bodies, right?
Mhm.
Another huge thing. So like being too much, right there is, um, I mean, I would say 90% when I say what's, your biggest insecurity, 90% of women, it's their bodies and body type and feel men liking them. And it just hurts my heart because I know it's a stereotype out there and it's strong, and I'm trying to beat it down one person
Right.
at a time, because it's not what I see. My men,
Mhm.
they do not care. They're like, is she happy? Will she laugh at my jokes? Is she playful? Is she fun? Does she love her body? But
Right.
it's so deeply ingrained in us that it's very hard to not make that the reason that they're not in a relationship they desire with the person they
Right.
desire. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh man, girl, body image is we could talk for like hours on this. And I know that you and well, I can only speak for myself, have had our own ups and downs. And and then aging is a whole nother conversation that has to do with it. But I'm certified in the work of Dr. Brene Brown, if anyone is familiar with her work. And her work is heavily focused on the feeling and experience of shame. And in her research, she shows that for men, their number one shame trigger is being perceived as weak. And for women, our number one shame trigger is all around our body and our appearance. And you're pointing out that you're right. Like 90% of our issues are around our body. And it's really fascinating to watch this generation, like especially Gen Z coming up in a world where body positivity is just a conversation that's happening, and fat acceptance and health at every size, and these conversations that were not happening when you and I were growing up. And if anyone's listening who's anywhere from a boomer to like an older millennial and Gen Xers, this wasn't the case. I mean, you and I were young in the late 90s and early 2000s when there was a very specific body type and it was very thin.
Right.
And this led to a lot of problems that stick around for a long, long time. So, I'll just, give one tool that I do personally, and that I tell my clients who are finding themselves struggling with this is like, what do you consume? Not what you're literally eating, but like, in terms of your media, who are you following on social media? Is it a bunch of fitness influencers that have that fall into this category of the quote unquote ideal body that is just not attainable for your body type. I quit doing that a long time ago and it shifted so many things for me. Like I follow Lizzo and like I follow all different body sizes, a lot of women in larger bodies. And it's just, I'll tell you this, like I will be very, very honest with you. It's both empowering and also sometimes a little bit jarring to see, 250-pound women dancing around in their bikini and just embracing themselves. It took a little bit of getting used to because, again, my old conditioning telling me that that's not okay. And also, it makes me a little sad. I was thinking about this week and I'm like, how different my life would have been had I been a teenager and 20 something growing up seeing that. And that was just normal because
Right.
I didn't see that. So I want people to really look at who you're following on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. And also, this is what I talk about a lot in the book is like, we have to unlearn a lot of this stuff about what is, and it's not just the flip of a switch. It is some diving deep for a lot. I have several friends actually who have specifically hired therapists who just focus on body stuff.
Yeah.
That's it.
Smart.
I have one friend right now who like her destiny like is to be in a larger body and she has counted calories her entire adult life and she's 42 and she's just now coming to terms with, okay, I want to be able to eat what I want to like nourish my body. And with that is going to be weight gain. And watching her go through this and I'm just like, oh my God, heartbreaking, but it's a thing. It is a thing.
It is, and I mean, my tools, when I talk to people in dating, I'm like, listen, you got to feel sexy. So go buy some beautiful lingerie under and dance in your mirror and feel good and go look at yourself and literally just say, I am gorgeous. I have the best body ever. And it's like, recondition your mind, it does, it pays off. I did everything with body image. I got tapped. I saw therapists. I've done all the things,
Yeah.
and I still battle it, but I gotta say I feel very sexy, at a lot of different weights, which is new. Last year I was 15 pounds lighter. I just gained 15 pounds and I'm like, okay, guess I'm gonna rock
Yeah.
this body this year. And I just, instead of, because I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm like, instead of going, I have to be in the best shape of my life and da 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 da. And I'm like, no, this is just going to be the body I'm rocking this year, and that's it. And happy
It's
about
super complicated.
It's super complicated. And I really do appreciate that tool. I think it's so smart to follow people that are,
just different from what you're used to. And I want to tell people just do it as an experiment and see what comes up for you like as you're looking at your feed. So this isn't about if you follow people in larger bodies or different bodies than your own, then in about a week or so, you're going to completely no, I just want you to see what comes up for you. Like in coaching, like the term curiosity is something we talk about all the time. And that's what I want people listening to do is just to get curious. And I also want to circle back to something that you said. I do think that it's a thing for men, not nearly as much. I know, especially in the gay community, body image is really big for them. And also, I think that it's also interesting to me, like how we can joke about the dad bod and how it's like cute and funny,
right.
but it's not for women.
No, it's not for me. And I will say this is anytime I tell a client, they don't care. They don't care. They don't care. The men don't care. Never. I mean, very small percentage, maybe in my
There's some that do, but you don't want them.
Yeah, my 14 years with this company, I've maybe met like 10% of the men that are like, I need this body type. Everybody else is like, they want the feeling of, they just want to be in love, and it's their core motivation.
Right. And they just want to see your boobs. Like let's be honest.
Yeah. They want some, if you feel sexy, they think you're sexy. And
100%.
that is totally what I see. So I want to address a couple things you mentioned in the book. I love that you said this. One of your quotes says, aging is another way women struggle to take up space. So a lot of my women and men, we have a large demographic of age, but I work with a ton of women and men that are mid 50s, late 50s, and 60s,
Mhm.
70s, and beyond, right? Um,
Yeah.
I would say my 60s and 70s are probably the most comfortable in who they are, for reasons of, just as we age, we're just in this body a lot longer,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
So tell me a little bit about that, aging and taking up space.
Yeah, and I'm only 46. So I don't have any experience beyond that, but it's been very interesting for me personally. When I hit around 41, 42 was when I really started to notice things were changing with my face and my neck and my body, just skin changing. It was, I'm starting to visibly age. And I don't think anyone can deny that we live in a culture where both beauty and youth are currency, and everyone has youth. And if you, at some point in their life, and if you're lucky enough to be, deemed beautiful, and that starts to go away, you essentially start losing your currency. And I, I've experienced, having quote unquote pretty privilege in my life, and have gotten things for free. I've gotten jobs based on the way I look because I was told. And when and I remember in my 30s, I would hear women in their 40s and 50s talk about like this kind of erasure. And I was like, "Oh, that doesn't sound great." And now I'm experiencing it. And I'm telling this story because it's a part of our evolution, and it's a part of the aging process, but it's also very personal. And again, it's a thing. Like it happens. And I don't want to be dismissive and say things like, platitudes of, aging is a privilege only given to not everyone. You should be grateful. And that is all true. 100%. Absolutely. There are so many people who were not given the gift to make it to age 46, and I'm grateful for that. And this can be a mind fuck.
Yeah. Right.
When
Right.
you're not, when you're used to being, checked out by guys in their 20s, and now I'm being checked out by men in their 50s and 60s. It's this sort of shift, and it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It just is something to contend with. And the reason that I'm putting some emphasis on this is that I don't want people to feel wrong for feeling uncomfortable with the aging process. I can't stand it when I'm in this Facebook group of like 50,000 women in their 40s. It's for Peloton. And inevitably, I mean, like beauty and weight gets talked about so much. And inevitably, there's somebody in the comments who's like, just embrace it. It's not that big of a deal. And I'm like, give people the dignity of their own process.
Yeah.
Give them the dignity. And like, let's stop faulting women for getting procedures and things like that. We're trying to hold on to any semblance of power that we have, and do what you want. Get Botox, don't get Botox. I tried it. I didn't like it. It didn't go with my face very well, and I probably won't do it again. But if you want to do that, then by all means do that. And at the same time, work on your mind, because aging is it's complicated. It's a thing. And also the beauty in it is like I don't ever want to go back to my 20s. Like I would love my 20-year-old neck, but I don't want the low self-esteem that I had, the struggle mentally and emotionally, like the tolerating of behavior that I was willing to do because I was so desperate for love and attention and affection. Never again. The wisdom that I have now, which I only imagine is going to get better and better into my 50s and 60s, is amazing. I love it. And there is something to be said about gaining self-confidence as we age. That's been my experience. It's not, it, there's a lot of work I've also had to do, which I talk about in the book. But yeah, I've gone on and on about this. I'm clearly passionate about
Well,
it.
I know it is a big thing, because a lot of my, let's say if we're just talking about women, they come into this dating world, and a lot of them have never dated, right?
Mhm.
A lot of clients of mine have just never dated. They've never been. This is a new thing where you're meeting this many people. You have access to this many people. It wasn't like
Right. And they've like been in a really long relationship and only slept with one person, or yeah.
right. So it's just really, and am I going to be attracted, like you said, to, someone in their 60s and 70s? and they are wildly attracted to these people. And so I just feel like, I tell a lot of women this. I say, if I could implant the mind of a 63-year-old woman in that of a 33-year-old woman, I am positive our world would be at peace. Like
Oh my God.
it is, every woman that I work with, and this is post, a lot of is post menopause. I remember reading a book one time that was called The Female Brain, and it gave a chart of like all of our hormones from, in the womb to postmenopause. And it was basically like, life's good. And then 13 hits, and it's like, life sucks, gets a little worse, gets a little worse, gets a little worse, gets a little worse, gets a little worse. I was like, oh my God. And then at 63, it's like, now you can breathe and you're
Just exhale.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, is that what we have to look forward to the next 2 decades?
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially 4 decades of misery. I don't know. So it blew my mind. And I'm with you. I can't wait I actually have to like just enjoy now, because I'm like, I just want to be evolved. I just want to be
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
Um, so I love that. I appreciate you. You also talk, and this is actually what you said, work on your mind. You also talk about the external and internal work, right?
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to hear, your thoughts on that, what you mean by that.
Yeah, I talk about that in, I think it's in the take up space chapter. And what does that actually mean? And in terms of taking up space for women specifically, it is about giving your opinions. It's even things like, I'm sure you've heard that statistic walking down the street and how women are, I can't remember what the actual stat is, but like we're much less likely to get out of the way if we're coming into contact with a man. And a lot of times we do this, unconsciously. So it's taking up space with your body and, speaking up at work and taking up space with your voice, taking up space with your emotions and your feelings, circling back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation. And, so that's the external stuff. That's the taking action part. And then the internal work is a little bit about what we were talking about, getting curious about why you might be afraid to give an opinion at work. What are you nervous that might happen? What are you, I can't stand it when people say, I hear this so much. Well, I don't want to set a boundary, or I don't want to have this hard conversation because I'm afraid of conflict. Literally no one likes conflict. Okay. And if they do, they're an asshole and shouldn't want to hang out with them. They're probably a sociopath if they enjoy a good conflict. No one does. So stop saying that. What you're really afraid of is a hard, uncomfortable conversation, which no one likes that. Nobody does. Like even me, who I do this for a living, and I procrastinate like crazy, especially hard conversations with my mom. Our family of origin is the beast. It really
Right.
is the beast. I would much rather have a hard conversation like with my neighbor or like my kid's teacher. But it's really about learning how to have the hard conversations. That's part of the internal work, and setting boundaries. What does that actually look like from a conversation standpoint? And also, again, the getting curious about what it is that you're afraid of. At the end of the day, for most of us deep down, we're afraid of being rejected. We're
Reflected.
afraid of someone sort of like ousting us and that happening. And most likely once you reach a certain age, that has already happened to you, hence having the fear of never wanting to go back there. But the truth is like you lived. It probably hurt terribly and broke your heart into pieces, and you rose again. So that's what I want people to think about. And that's what builds their self-confidence.
Yeah. Doing it, the actual action. Like as you're talking, I'm thinking about, how in relating this to dating, the first few months of building a new relationship, past date 1, date 2, date 3, we have a connection. There's attraction, there's compatibility, we have a connection, it's good. So what do we do now? Well, now that next 12 weeks should be some adventures, some new
Mhm.
experiences mixed with a lot of tough conversations. And so I always am like, don't have the conversation, talk about sex, talk about spirituality,
Talk about finances.
talk about it all. Have some really uncomfortable conversations in the first 12 weeks and see how you guys move through it, right? So I love that.
I
Um,
want to say something really quick, Jolene. It's
yeah.
like one of the things that I had to learn that I had to also call my therapist and say, like, what is going on? So I didn't know when I was dating my now husband, I didn't know how to have a hard conversation without a fight.
Yeah.
Or I had never had a hard conversation that wasn't preceded by a fight. Never.
Right.
And so I didn't realize why I was picking fights with my, then boyfriend. And I called my therapist. I remember like it's like a hushed conversation. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I sabotaging this relationship? And she's like, you've known nothing but conflict. And it's a pattern that's been created. And now you need to, the good news is that you're noticing that you're doing it. And
Right.
now you need to be proactive about difficult things that happen in your relationship instead of reactive, which is what you're used to doing. And I was like, I was in my early 30s at that point.
Right.
I had to unlearn years of patterns. And I didn't do it perfectly every time. But now I've got it down to a science and it feels so much better than fighting. Like an uncomfortable conversation feels so much better than fighting. And also, here's one other thing I learned that I had never done before: taking responsibility for my sometimes terrible behavior. Like, and like saying, I'm sorry.
Right.
It's amazing how humbling it is and how much closer it can bring you to your partner.
I think that is relevant even in the early stages of dating, because that's what's not going on. The reason people aren't connecting, there's a million people they can meet. They're meeting a lot of great people, but they're stopping themselves from insecurity and fear. Just straight up.
Mhm.
They just do not push themselves past the uncomfortable conversations. Now, I mean, they ghost each other. They don't even say, "Hey, I notice you're disconnecting. Um,
Yeah.
are you still interested in moving forward? And if you're not, that's okay, right?" Like, but don't you there's you don't need to disconnect. And so, I
Right.
really, our culture is one that we promote. um what'd you say, saying it like it is, or you said
Say what's there.
say what's there.
Mhm.
It's just lunch culture is just say what's there. Yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
um Okay, so I actually do have another question. Um, so I wanted to know your perception of men in the dating world who have also been told they're not good enough, like women, right? And how do you see women of influence? So women who have done the work and are coming and are powerful. How do you see women of influence understanding this and applying it into their dating lives? Does that make sense? What I'm
Yeah. I think so. I'll give you a personal example. So the whole notion of good enough and it's called worthiness also in my circles.
Yeah.
um it's tricky. And I think the misconception can be is that we do the work, through therapy or whatever, and we get to a place where we have it down to a science and we feel worthy, etc. That has not been the case for me. And I think all of the experts that I've read, Brene Brown being one of them, and it sort of comes and goes depending if you're triggered, depending on what's going on in your life. And so I also made a discovery recently in therapy, and I kept kind of circling back, and I'm like, I don't feel like I'm unworthy. Like I know that I'm a worthy human being. And a lot of times logically we know this, like we know that we're worthy of a great relationship, but it's like this deep core feeling, like when we're at our worst, when we're at our most vulnerable is when we feel it. And I finally realized that my deepest, darkest fear is that people don't really give a shit about me, that no one really, really cares all that much, because I've had evidence of that in my past relationships and in a little bit of my family of origin. And that wasn't the case. My parents loved me. They did, and they cared, but I saw evidence that they did not through some mistakes that they made. So anyway, I say all that because these are the sort of like deep core, deepest, darkest secrets that most of us have. So I think to answer your question, what I have found is helpful, and this is like the most vulnerable, is to talk about it with someone that you're dating. I don't recommend it maybe on the first date, but
Right.
if you're several dates in, and these kind of conversations are built over time. You sort of like put out a little bit of breadcrumbs and see what's there. John Gottman's work tells us that trust is built in small increments over time. So this is a big conversation that you'll build up to. and and just talk about what it looks like in your life. And what I hear too, I don't know if you hear this too, Jolene, is people say, I've had someone in the past hold that against me later on, like, in an argument, and they'll throw it in my face. And I am like, then that is not a good relationship. That
Right.
is a huge red flag
Right.
of very unhealthy behavior. And you can ask that person not to do that again and point it out in the moment. And then if they continue to do it,
You need to
I
move
would
on.
I would say no.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I tell all my clients to hold out for something really high functioning. It's just, you don't need to. Um, if it doesn't feel pretty great, then that person, it needs to be released on their journey to continue on their path.
Especially if they're unwilling to grow. I mean, that
Absolutely.
was that was a huge problem in former relationships that I've had. And also just you are not your partner's therapist.
Right.
Like
Right.
you're not. And I have tried to be that before, and it's a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah. It doesn't work at all, at all. I've done it too.
Yeah.
So okay, so here's one thing, and this is kind of towards the men. Um, and this is little things, but like they want to know how to act. Like they always ask me, should I go in for the kiss? Do I ask for the kiss? Do I treat? Do I hold the door up? Like they are like, post me to what are their rules? So
I
I
can I want to empathize with men in that it has got to be incredibly confusing right now. I've had some conversations with my husband, and he's not even dating, or at least I hope he's not, like where he is even sort of like tiptoed around me because I've gotten fired up about things. And like I'm talking to him about something and he thinks I'm mad at him. And I'm like, I'm not mad at you. Like I'm just expressing
the
myself.
whole
So
gender.
yeah, so I get it. Like I totally get it, and how difficult that can be. If you are dating someone who is more or less an evolved woman who is thinking about and having conversations about these social issues, I think I again say what's there,
Yeah.
ask her. Just ask her. And you can even say, I want to make sure that this is a conversation where we're super clear on it. I don't want to make any assumptions. And I would love to be the one who pays for dinner, but what do you think? Like, is that okay with you? And just ask. And I think that it's what I want for my daughter and my son, who are only 11 and 13 respectively. I want them to grow up and be in relationships with people who just are not afraid to express what they want and ask their partners what they want. And like, there's no reason that this can't be the case for adults. Did that answer your question?
It does, because I feel like there is some agreement, unspoken agreement when we go on a date with someone new, that we are both saying, I'm looking for romance. I'm looking for love. I'm looking for connection. And I don't know if it's you, but we've already entered into an agreement that says we're going to respect each other and our hopes and dreams, regardless. And so I think I always tell. So I love that you just said ask, because with the kissing one, I get that a lot, and I say, well, listen, our dates are pretty reserved. Like we don't have like a lot of first date kisses. We have like first date meetings and then
Mhm.
proper dates, so that's kind of how it goes. And then probably by the third date, that person's having a first kiss or something like that. And so I'll just say to the men, I'll say, ask her, say, have a little bit of romance in it, right? Like you can walk her to her door and say, I had a wonderful evening. Would it be okay if I kissed you goodnight? She's either going to say two things. She's going to say, yes, I would love that. Or she's going to say, I want to take it slow, or I'm not really ready, or I'm not really
Mhm.
there. Either is great. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're out. It just means I don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
Like it means whatever
Well,
it means to her.
exactly. And I think that's really great. Also if we're talking to like millennials and Gen Z people, and for baby boomers and Gen Xers, I still think it's relevant. Like for me, this is what I did when I was ready for my husband to kiss me when we were dating. Like I put my arms around his neck and got like this close to his face. Like there are still cues
Right. Thank
that
you.
are relevant.
Right. Like we all still want to do this dance and we want to do it
Right.
really well. And I think the key is in the not making assumptions, like the rules, right? Don't go
Mhm.
Google Usually what we've learned is the right way. And to younger men who aren't making the move at all, right? Because they were never taught to courtship. And this is men in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s, really. I mean, it's like, this is an old school thing that I see where the other men just want to make sure they're doing it okay. But their instincts are correct. And then the
Right.
younger ones aren't doing it all. Their instincts are not correct. They are, they're not making women feel super safe or comfortable. So they do have
Mhm.
to, I think, get back to the asking. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I always tell people, like, blame it on me. Like, if people don't know how to broach the conversation, you could say, like, so I was watching this interview between these two women and they were talking about this topic. What do you think? And just throw it out there and like open up the conversation if you don't know how to start talking about it.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's great advice. It's okay that is what we're doing. When they're dating, they're in a place of discovery, right?
Mhm.
Like, and it's fun because I'll have a lot of clients, especially older ones, that'll come back and they're like, I feel like I'm 16 again. I can't believe I'm asking you this, but right. And they do. And I'm like, that to me is this little, oh, you got a good one. If you
Mhm.
feel so nervous about having a silly conversation that you've probably had a million times, and you feel that like giddy about it, I'm like, oh, you met your match.
That's telling you
It's like,
something. Mhm.
sure, it's so cool.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah. So thank you so much. I really feel like this was very informative for a lot of clients and really empowering to help them understand and just hear your words of like, it's all good. Get
Mhm.
out there. Just say it. You're loved. You're
And
already
you'll be
loved, right?
okay. Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you
for
want
sure.
to add
Thank you.
anything else?
No, just people can get the book wherever books are sold after August 31st. And there's a free workbook and book club that I'm doing, AndreaOwen.com/noise. All the information's there.
Okay. And I'm going to have that link uploaded in the bio for this interview. And I
Thank you,
just want to say
darling.
thank you. And I love you so much. And you're
Oh,
amazing.
my pleasure. My
And the
pleasure.
book,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, the book was rad. Oh, so good.
Oh, awesome. I love it. There it is.
There it is right there. Okay. Take care.
Bye.